When Arcane debuted, it made a big splash with not only the League of Legends fans, but people who didn't even know it had any connection to the game. Like me, I love the show despite never having played the source. From the complex characters to the gorgeous stylized animation, there has been so much to love with this series since it dropped, and fans have been waiting anxiously for the follow-up since 2021. Different times. With this video, I want to go back to the first season, highlight some of my favorite elements and why they work. I also want to compare it to the second season to see how it measures up, and look at the finale to see how they wrap the story up that they were telling. Obviously, with all that said, we're going to be touching on spoilers here. You've been warned. Let's do this. Alright internet, the first thing I want to talk about is the first season's structure. Returning viewers to my channel will not be surprised that this is the first thing I want to geek out about. But can you blame me? The way the season is structured is really cool. The 9-episode season is broken up into three 3-episode arcs that gives each story arc their own little 3-act structure with setup, escalation, and climax, while also serving as one part of the greater 3-act structure. Like I said, it's really cool. And these allow for some really interesting bits of storytelling. The first arc following the sisters as kids, highlighting a formative moment in their shared history, and that's so exciting to me. These aren't flashbacks we are getting, but a full story, and these kids are fully fledged characters in their own right. It makes catching up with them once they have grown all the more sad, because we know where they came from. And I love how the show's release was tailored to this. While Netflix usually drops their entire season in one go, they didn't do that with Arcane. Instead, they released each of the 3 acts separately, 1 week apart. This helped not only reinforce the storytelling of the season, but also help build up the hype week to week, similar to weekly releases, but while still inhabiting the binge model Netflix is known for. I honestly wish we could get more release models like this that help with the storytelling instead of just choosing between drop it all at once or weekly. Streaming has gotten into either or, but they can really do anything if they wanted to, and they should allow for more creativity within this. With the new season, we see more of this, but I do question the execution just a little bit. Like in season 1, we are getting 3 stories with some distance between them. Act 2 of the new season begins with a montage of what Vi has been up to in the interim, and that is my issue. Not that the montage was bad, because I think it was done so well. The intensity of the montage and the music really tie well into Vi's spiraling. I just wish we could have gotten more of it. I understand there is a lot of plot going on this season, maybe too much, we will get into that, but I would have loved to take a bit more time with Vi in her spiral, and get more of her dynamic with the underwritten Loris, something that could have been a compelling story on its own. But on the other hand, if they did something like a whole episode on that, their story might slow down too much. It's not that I think what the show did was the wrong choice, it just left me wanting more. And I guess that's kind of the point. I think of all the jumps we are filled in on in Act 2, my favorite is Caitlyn's. That shot of her in bed and the underwritten Maddie leaning over to her is a gut punch that works so well because of the jump. If we saw how their relationship developed, it wouldn't have been as impactful. And if I'm being honest, makes us hate Caitlyn even more. They have been testing the limits on how much we can forgive, and I think that would have tipped a lot of fans over the line. Her relationship with Vi is so important to so many fans, and getting all the details of Caitlyn starting an emotionally one-sided relationship with someone else would be too much. Time jump good. I do think that this season's use of the 3-episode, 3-act structure isn't as perfect as the first, only because this season had so much more story to tell. Hear me out, because I think 4 3-episode acts would have given the story a little more room. Act 3 would still start with the episode of Echo, Heimerdinger, and Jace's experiences. Then the second would be an episode for Mel and the Black Rose, taking her bits from Act 2 out, giving it its own episode and expanding on them. That gives her part of the story more weight and frees up a bit of time in Act 2 for Vi and Jinx to reconnect more, something I'm sure everyone would be happy with more of. I'm not sure what the third episode of this act would be, other than some kind of standalone to flesh out some other part of the world, but we'd have the final act with everything coming to a head, like it is, but with 3 episodes instead of 2 to tell that part of the story. Or that entire climax is the final episode, but instead of it being one rushed episode compared to the 2 it originally was, you make it like a feature-length episode. I know this idea might be ass and might be making the season feel bloated and padded out, and it's not like the season is bad and needs fixing. It is still great, but if I didn't take this detour in the video, it would have eaten out the back of my head like a parasite. What is arguably the best element of Arcane, what the fans of both the game and show cite as its greatest strength, is the characters. In particular, the growing dynamics of the characters' relationships. The centerpiece of the show is the different relationships with Vi at the center. In particular, her relationship with her sister Jinx. The entire first act of the season follows them as kids, setting up their dynamic growing up and the split that tears them apart. Even when the story time jumps and both the story and cast of characters expand, the sisters remain at the center of it. Jinx is more of the driving source of the plot, because of her own complicated relationship with surrogate father Silco, a character that we will get to in a bit. But in turn, Vi is pulled into the plot during Act 2 to help hunt down her sister, setting up one of the other central relationships. Vi's relationship with Caitlyn is so important for the development of Vi as a character. As we're reintroduced to her in Act 2, Vi's become hardened by the events of Act 1, and working with Caitlyn over the course of the season not only opens her up, but sets her on the tracks to become the character from the game. A lot of show-only fans were surprised when the Season 2 trailer came out and it seemed that they were going full cop with her. Something that game fans were more than happy to make fun of by playing clips of Vi's dialogue in the game that those other people did not play. ACAB includes badass lesbian brawlers. But regardless of what Vi's path is, the only reason she is on that path to begin with is because of her relationship with Caitlyn. It gave her purpose when she didn't have any and helped her grow as a character in ways that she wouldn't have alone. And in turn, it is Vi's relationship with Caitlyn that triggers Jinx's jealousy, pushing her over the edge, leading to the climax of Season 1's third act. But this isn't limited only to the dynamics around the sisters. The advances Victor makes with his hex tech experiments are fueled not only by his deteriorating health, but from the anger and jealousy he has had when Jace turns his focus away from their work. Jace's focus on the Piltover Council, on the other hand, was only possible because of the relationship he was able to build with Mel. Her believing in him got him past all the red tape, got him on the council, and got him laid. And this web of complicated interpersonal dynamics are being driven by extremely well done three-dimensional characters. The season has something like 9 main characters that they're balancing on top of all the supporting players, and it could be easy to make them flat, stock characters. Let the plot and the dynamics do the work. You could easily see a version of Arcane that lets the gorgeous animation that we will be talking about do a lot of the heavy lifting, but that is not the case. Let's look at Silco for this. He is introduced as a pretty classic type of villain. He's conniving, craving power, and will do anything he can to get it. Right there, he's pretty simple, a stock archetype that when done well can still be very compelling. But the show digs deeper. At the end of Act 1, he takes in Powder, fostering her as she grows into Jinx. He becomes a father to her and really does seem to genuinely care about her. Some fans have used this to say that he was good, citing his final words to her.
Don't cry. You're perfect.
But I have to disagree. Being a parent is more than just unconditional love, but being able to get your child the help they need. So while yes, it is touching that Silco loves her even though she is clearly mentally unwell, he should be finding ways to help Jinx, not enable her. And that's what makes him so interesting. His flaws create a compelling character, and they all fall in line with who he was when he was first introduced. It's fantastic writing. On the flip side, we can see Vander, who is a much better person than Silco, but not one without flaws. He is much more classically caring to the 4 kids he has taken in, making their safety his #1 priority. And on the grander scale, his actions are to protect the people of Zaun instead of rule over them like Silco. Vander isn't perfect though. He clearly focuses a bit more on young Vi than the others. She is the oldest, and he seems to be working with the system of you raise the oldest first, and then they can help raise the other. That sort of trickle-down parenting that I do not think is the best way to raise kids. Made worse when, both through words and actions, he's teaching Vi that sacrificing yourself for those you love is virtuous and the right thing to do. A lesson that she carries with her all the way into Act 3, offering herself to Jinx to save Caitlyn. A noble move, risking her life for someone else, hoping it can be the opportunity to save her sister, but one that very much requires her to give herself to do so. Honestly, making Arcane a prequel to the game is a brilliant move. Not only does it keep you from affecting the game in any major way, but it allows you to create characters outside of how they are portrayed, and then find some way to their defining factors and ask the question of why they are the way they are. Season 2 expands on the story a lot, like a lot, but still manages to keep its characters at the center. The dynamic of having Jinx and Vi working together in Act 2 to try and save Vander is a high point, as it further develops their relationship in new ways. They finally get to connect as adults in a way that they haven't yet. On top of that, you have Jinx and Isha developing their own sisterly dynamic that Jinx herself says reminds her of growing up with Vi. Putting Jinx in the big sister role here is a classic move, and this relationship might have been the best one in the season and does in 6 episodes what some shows would fail to do in their entire run, making us care. One of the weakest elements of the new season, I will say, is also tied to character relationships. In particular, the ones with the new characters introduced. Maddie, Loris, and Steb are all characters who, when introduced in episode 1, and positioned as Caitlyn's team in episode 2, feel like they are going to play major roles going forward. And they kind of do, Maddie and Loris being part of Caitlyn and Vi's arcs, respectively, but they only exist in the story when needed. They don't have much life of their own. They are minor characters, and that is fine, but they are carrying the weight of important characters' growth while having nothing to do outside of that. I think if they had gotten a little more to do, that really could have helped, especially in Loris's case. They are underwritten, but only because their introductions make them feel a little bit too important. It makes Loris dying feel less impactful, same for Maddie's sudden but inevitable betrayal. Not that these moments don't work, in particular Maddie's does, but I think they are moments that just could have hit harder. Jace and Victor's relationship is also still central to their respective stories, despite barely sharing any scenes. Their actions and worldviews are so defined by their experiences, in particular by the work they've done together. These two really are characters whose fates are intertwined, pushing them to opposite ends of the spectrum as they interact with the Arcane, only to hurl them back into each other. Victor has the classic evolving past humanity storyline, but he doesn't get to that end until Jace returns. Before that, Victor cares so much about keeping his humanity intact, keeping everyone who he interacts with humanity intact, but it is after they collide that he starts yapping about how choice is false and all that. It's a really fun way to spin a classic trope. This season also digs deeper into Mel's relationship with Mbessa and how their family's entanglement with the Black Rose is a driving force to the wider plot. While I would have liked more of that overall, I do appreciate what was done so much. Everything in this show ties back to the characters, and the characters' ever-evolving relationships help drive how they push the plot forward. That is true in episode 1, and it stays true until the end. Lastly, I obviously can't help but discuss the beautiful animation of the show. This is, like most things in the show, been talked to death, and now it's my turn. Arcane exists in the same world of animation as the Spider-Verse films or that Ninja Turtle one I need to get to, where they are blending 2D and 3D animations in interesting ways. In particular, Arcane uses 2D style animation on the backgrounds, blended with more overtly 3D character models, with an emphasis on the movement and lighting, defining a lot of the show's style. It is deeply textured, mimicking hand-drawn on the characters in particular, which adds to their expressiveness, and instead of looking to emulate reality, the focus is on a cohesive world with tons of emotion and action. Now, I can't find the source on this now, which is pissing me off, but I remember in 2021 or early 2022 hearing about how the animation studio Fortiche took a lot more of a lead on the production of the show than the writers. I can't speak with any confidence on that point, but I think it makes sense, in part because it apparently strays from the game lore a lot at times, but mainly because of how the story is told through its visuals. This is done in small ways, like the beautiful establishing shots. Especially early on, these shots not only set up where the scene takes place, but tells us about how different Piltover and Zaun are. From the lighting and colors being much more naturally stylized in Piltover, to seeing how much more open space exists above ground, while in Zaun homes are built on top of each other. Visual juxtapositions that innately feed us information that would have been so bulky if done as dialogue. I'm not the full-on anti-exposition type. It can be done in really compelling ways, and sometimes that can be the best way to tell a story. But that said, Arcane might be the perfect argument for the concept of show, don't tell. The way they use those jinx scratches, as they're referred to help express her mental state is something I really appreciate, because it adds a unique flavor to the show. Seriously, if you want me to love your show, find a cool thing that other ones aren't doing and make that your thing. Just don't overdo it because it will feel gimmicky. And I think this season really found the balance. The best animated sequence in the entire season, and I would assume that most people would agree, is the fight between Jinx and Echo. By this point in the story, the show has already given us plenty of hard-hitting kinetic action, so to emphasize this scene, they flipped the script. Blending imagery of them as kids to remind us of their history with the more abstract style that takes a step outside of reality really makes this stand out. It also showcases Echo's ability to manipulate time from the game. The abstract sequence is a glimpse of a possible timeline, and when he rolls it back, he uses that information to get the upper hand. And in that moment, they switch back to their classic animation style. But the cherry on top is the character beat that follows. Echo is someone who wants peace and realizes that he is hurting his childhood friend while going against that belief. At this point, we know Jinx is a danger. Echo knows it too, and we're proved it at the end of the sequence, but it doesn't stop him from hesitating to finish her off, because that is not who he is, and getting to see him make that choice, knowing it will end badly because of who he is what makes the show so interesting. Unsurprising, but the animation of this season still slaps. The high bar Fortiche has set for themselves has been constant across all 18 episodes, not only in quality, but in creativity. My favorite is the sequence that opens up the season. There are plenty of sequences that alter the visual style to show or add emphasis to what is going on. The awesome montage that opens episode 2 is actually part of what oversells the new characters in Caitlyn's team. But it does rule. I think every time the show changes style, it does succeed in the goal of adding emphasis. But I do think that the season opener is the best example of it. Shots focused on a single character, most often Caitlyn, animated regularly against beautiful, solid charcoal drawings. These give the sequence a somber feeling and emphasizes the isolating feeling of grief. That feeling is compounded by the backgrounds all being single frame images. Any motion in these backgrounds are done by fading between stills instead of regular animation for it. This heightens the grief and how time doesn't really feel like it's passing in the same way when we are mourning. On top of that, I think it's fantastic that Fortiche announced that those backgrounds are actually all hand-drawn pieces done with actual charcoal. They really do treat animation as a labor of love, and I think you can really feel that when watching, even when you don't know those little bits of trivia. My only real complaint related to the animation if you could call it that, is the Season 2 introduction. Not because it is bad animation, it is gorgeous, but I don't think it pairs well with the theme music. Now, I'm no Imagine Dragons fan, but I think that the song that they have written here works really well with Season 1's opening, but feels way too upbeat for the visuals this time around. I wish they had gotten a new track, or done a down-tempo remix of Enemy to match the visuals instead, but this isn't a big deal. I still watched the intro before every episode when I was binging them. Of how in the front half of the final episode, when they are doing the siege, they took a step back from the hyper-stylized action that the show is so good at for a more grounded, war film-inspired look. Animating shots with a handheld Saving Private Ryan feel helps give the sequence a unique impact that I really do appreciate. There are still some flourishes, but they keep it restrained, so when Jinx and Echo show up and the animation style shifts, it emphasizes it even harder. Overall, Arcane is fantastic. I know I may have some complaints in this video, but they are nitpicks really. I think the show is great. It's great for all the things I've said in this video and the many things that I haven't said here. Honestly, check out some of the videos people are making comparing the shots from Season 1 to Season 2, because it really emphasizes how much they care about the visual language and metaphors and parallels in the show. I may have no experience with League of Legends, but as far as final products go, Arcane is the best video game adaptation we've gotten yet.
So good!
I know there are a lot of other fans who are less enthusiastic about the ending than I am, and that's totally valid, and I do agree that it's not as good a second season as the first one was, but even with the step down, I do think that it is still a high bar set for television animation and video game adaptations as a whole. I hope Fortiche gets to keep making shows set in this world. I know there are plans to do more, and they have barely scratched the surface of all of the champions that there are in the game, so we'll see. I know that at this point I'm pretty hooked. I'm going to tune in for sure. And if anything, you can think of the faults in Arcane as the opportunity to learn and grow and make an even better product with the next series, one that doesn't have the same kind of pacing issues, which I think is what really bogged down this second season. I'll also say I don't mind the fact that not everything is resolved in a complete or even cohesive way. I do think that a lot of it is open-ended in a way that is intentional, so that way that they can keep building off of what they've already set down. And honestly, I don't think endings in general need to be conclusive to be satisfying. Hell, I even like when a ending isn't what you would call satisfying. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video, comment on the video your thoughts, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, have a good one.